Yes, they dropped the charges and so on. I don't blame them, though. I have a reputation for being absent. However, that reputation the funk cannot be faked. Sly Stone was the first to know that. Between worlds that were never meant to meet, he constructed bridges. Chaos and groove, rock and soul, black and white. He wasn't merely a musician, he was changing the course of history. Since the rules were never intended for someone like Sly Stone, he disregarded them. He put men and women, black and white, on the same stage as equals, rewriting them with every bass line and horn blast. Sly listened through it all. To the records that made his bones tremble and his mind widen, not to reviewers or charts. Larry also plays bass. He is Cindy Robinson's trumpet-playing relative. There was no background noise in these 7 albums. They served as revolutionary blueprints. He learned from albums that melody could be healing and rhythm could be revolt. Neither Sly nor the records he cherished ever played it safe. They all cracked open something. He learned from each that music might be more than just amusement. There might be a change. Sly was absorbing genius from all sides before psychedelic soul had a name, before integration became a stage reality, and before funk as we know it existed. Sly Stone named these 7 rock albums his favorites, along with the reasons they were significant. These documents influenced a revolutionary. If you enjoy reading about the origins of genius, please hit the subscribe button, leave a comment, and let us know which album had the biggest impact on your life. 7. The Lonely Hearts Club Band by Sgt. Pepper. Sgt. Pepper wasn't the only thing Sly heard. He sensed that everything had been rewired. The Beatles weren't working on an album when they released this in 1967. The world was being built by them. Sly noticed that right away. Grinning, he referred to it as organized pandemonium. It's not that easy. Nothing easy to understand. It is not always the case that the man and his spouse coexist harmoniously. Like a fever dream that made perfect sense, each song flowed into the next. Lucy with Diamonds in the Sky. A typical day in your life, but without you. These weren't merely tracks. They were measurements. Sly was already experimenting with his own band, fusing styles that no one had ever considered possible. Sgt. Pepper, however, showed him that you could do more. The studio itself might be used as an instrument. The Beatles had stopped following the rules. With each orchestral flourish and overdub, they were creating new ones. That kind of bravery was something Sly admired. He once remarked, "If you stopped caring about what was normal, they made you believe anything was possible." Sly was most affected by the freedom it offered. The record didn't seem to be an attempt to win over anyone. It sounded like 4 men trusting the ride and following their gut feelings into the unknown. Sly felt something ignited by that bravery. He would start making his own kaleidoscope in a matter of months. That same energy gave rise to both standing and dancing to the music. Sgt. Pepper had more than simply sway. It was permission to have no boundaries. 6. Attend the Apollo Live. It wasn't an album. It was a weapon. James Brown caught lightning in a bottle when he recorded live at the Apollo in 1962. When Sly heard it, she instantly realized what a live performance could accomplish. Looking back, I see that I had a rock and roll song, but I was composing blues. Perfection was not the goal. It was about an audience going crazy together, about presence, and about sweat and soul. Brown was more than just a singer. He converted a theatre into a cathedral of rhythm, gave orders, and gave sermons. When this record landed on his turntable, Sly was still honing his technique, but it gave him insights that no studio could. Brown's technique of stretching a note till it hurt and manipulating the audience like a maestro tugging strings made please, please, please more than just a song. It was a theatrical production that transformed desperation into art. Sly claimed that Brown taught him that strength may come from weakness. If you were the sole owner, this album's groove was entirely instinctual. James Brown and his band were expressing themselves honestly and unvarnished, with no safety net or second takes. Sly took in that energy and applied it to every stage he came into contact with. He discovered that providing a performance was more important than being flawless. It was about being present and giving it your all until nothing was left. The sound of a man who wouldn't hold back was heard live at the Apollo, and that feeling stayed with Sly forever. 5. A re-examination of Highway 61, the world exploded when Dylan turned electric. In 1965, Highway 61 revisited appeared like a thunderclap that no one anticipated. Sly was listening. Like a Rolling Stone, he heard Dylan take folk music and plug it into the future. The song of a skinny man. Row of Desolation. It didn't matter if you comprehended these tunes. You were challenged to attempt. Dylan made his writing sound revolutionary by using riddles. Sly appreciated its chutzpah. Dylan wasn't pursuing radio hits or being cautious. He was going where people felt uneasy because he was acting on his own vision. Later on, Sly would accomplish just that with A Riot is in Progress. He recognized a model for artistic freedom in Dylan. You owed no one an explanation. Even if it was unpleasant, perplexing, or difficult to accept, you owed them honesty. Highway 61's creation was unadulterated and vibrant. It sounded as though it had been captured during a heated dispute. Guitars growled, organs whirled. Dylan's voice sliced through everything like poetry wrapped around shattered glass. Sly allegedly said that Dylan had taught him that, with the correct training, words could be used as weapons. That music only needed to be real in order to have power. It didn't need to be beautiful. Additionally, Highway 61 Revisited was the truth, no holds barred. 4. Tommy had a message that made him angry. The Who demonstrated that it was possible to be both loud and literary when they produced this rock opera in 1969. Pete Townshend's ambition was admirable to Sly. This album wasn't all that. It was a declaration, a tale told with desperation, distortion and drumming. Wizard of Pinball, I'm available. Come see me, feel me. Each song was a part of a bigger picture. Since he shared that cognitive process, Sly was able to relate to it. The Who were more than just musicians. They created moments. Tommy was shockingly sensitive, theatrical and explosive. Sly heard what he was attempting to do in it, transform something familiar into something unexpected. The melodies remained lovely despite the guitar screaming. The feeling was genuine despite the odd lyrics. Sly was intrigued by that discrepancy. You could be creative and still have an impact on people's lives. Tommy gave Sly the guts to create something greater than a single, to think creatively, and to have faith in your audience. His album There's a Riot Going On, which rejected simple solutions, was released a few years later. It was uncompromising, smart and messy, much like Tommy. Sly learned from The Who that rock could be more than just 3 chords and a hook. Architecture might be the cause. It might be art that made you think while you dance and kick down doors. 3. Do you have experience? Hendrix owned a guitar, but he didn't play it. When Are You Experienced was released in 1967, it instantly changed the parameters of what 6 strings could do. Sly felt the ground move beneath him as he heard Purple Haze, Foxy Lady, and Manic Depression. This was electricity learning to communicate, not just music. In a single song, Hendrix made the guitar scream, cry, whisper, and explode. Sly admired such a combination of madness and mastery. Sly was most impressed by Hendrix's courage. There was no genre he was seeking to fit into. He was constructing his own cosmos in which rock, psychedelic music, blues, and something completely different came together. The music was simultaneously intimate and massive. According to Sly, Hendrix performed as if he was speaking to the universe. Even though it seemed chaotic, every note felt deliberate. That equilibrium affected Sly's approach to his own arrangements. Additionally, Hendrix demonstrated to Sly that being a virtuoso did not equate to soul loss. The emotion was never eclipsed by the technical mastery. Are You Experienced was both unpolished and unvarnished. It was graceful and gritty. Sly applied that knowledge to his own work, adding layers of intricacy without sacrificing rhythm. Hendrix demonstrated that you might be the best musician in the room and still create music that had an equal impact on people's bodies and brains. The production of the album was also groundbreaking. It was like traveling into space while keeping your feet on the earth when listening to songs like Third Stone from the Sun. Hendrix was using studio techniques that no one had yet mastered to distort reality. Sly's personal goal of pushing boundaries was directly aligned with his experimental edge. Sly spent his entire career chasing greatness like that, too. Cloud 9, growing up. This was the sound of Motown. When Cloud 9 debuted in 1969, it completely altered Sly's perception of what soul music could be. Barrett Strong and Norman Whitfield were producing with social concern and hallucinogenic undertones. The songs of the Temptations were no longer solely about love. They were singing about the actual world. I Can't Be With You, Runaway Kid, Running Wild. These were powerful tunes. Beyond the dance floor, they had something to say. In Cloud 9, Sly heard his own image reflected back at him. Funk, rock, soul and protest were all incorporated throughout the album to create something unquestionably urgent. Guitars fuzzed, bass lines throbbed, and the voices soared over all of it with strength and purpose. The production was rich and layered. Sly used the highest compliment when he claimed that this was the point at which Motown became dangerous rather than predictable. Sly was similar to Cloud 9 since it was honest. The Temptations forced you to move while tackling poverty, addiction, and hardship. Sly believed in that balance above all. Music has the potential to be both serious and enjoyable. It might cause you to think and dance. Cloud 9 demonstrated that enlightenment and entertainment did not have to be mutually exclusive in soul music. It might accomplish both, and that's exactly what Sly did all his career. The title track was a masterwork of contradiction in and of itself. It addressed drug escapism, but it did so in a catchy groove that made you forget you were listening to a warning. Making medicine taste like candy is a brilliant idea. Sly was well aware of such strategy. Let's start with Little Richard. Well, Little Richard existed before everything else. And that was the universe's beginning for Sly Stone. In 1957, Little Richard made his debut and ignited the world. Rip It Up
Tall, Tooty, Fruity Sally. Permission was not requested for these songs. They insisted on being noticed. Little Richard was yelling, thudding, and trembling with an uncontrollable ferocity. When Sly heard that, she instantly recognized the sound of liberation. Little Richard was more than just a performer. He was explosive. He played the piano like he was trying to shatter it, shouted like a preacher, and wore makeup in a time when others wanted him to be neither. He was black, queer, and unrepentant. That was brave of Sly. He observed someone who refused to let anyone lower their light. He never forgot that lesson. Be more authentic than anyone can imagine. The sheer joy in Here's Little Richard was what made it precious to Sly. Little Richard created music that glorified life despite the harshness of the world. The enthusiasm was contagious. It had a primordial rhythm. Sly once claimed that he learned from Little Richard that being courteous was not important in music. It was about being open and fearlessly allowing everything that was inside of you erupt outward. Every song Sly ever wrote was infused with that passion. Richard lighted the fuse. Sly maintained the flames. He learned from Little Richard that disobeying the law was more than just disobedience. It was essential. On these tracks, the tunes were not accompanied by the piano. They were attacked by it. Each keystroke sounded like a proclamation of independence. That aggressiveness was absorbed by Sly, who transformed it into funk. He added levels of musical sophistication and social insight to Little Richard's fire. However, the core didn't change. Sound is freedom, music is emancipation. Sly Stone was not the only person influenced by Little Richard. He allowed himself to be himself. Trends were never Sly Stone's thing, he made them. However, a listener who studied the masters was the driving force behind his brilliance. These 7 albums served as fuel in addition to being favorites. He learned something fundamental about truth, rhythm, and courage from each of them. After assimilating them all, Sly created something wholly original. Share your favorite record in the comments section and subscribe for more if these tales spoke to you.